We have an acreage, part of it is wooded and part of it is a field. And this is the field part, so this is kind of an overall picture of some of the devices that we use for pumping our water. You can see the windmill. And to the upper right is our wind generator that generates some electricity. And then also in the foreground, a little bit to the left, are some photovoltaic panels, and we'll have a few more pictures of all these. This is a little bit of an overview. And I'm always eager to point out to people that these are the photogenic things, but they're really not the important things, because we're a fairly low budget operation. These are small devices. They don't generate that much electricity in terms of the amount of consumption that the average U.S. household would use. So the real key to success for what we do is the fact that we don't use very much. And because we don't use very much, then these relatively simple devices provide for our needs. But we will talk a little specifically about some of these things. The windmill is familiar to anyone who's driven around the Oklahoma countryside. This one's about 80 years old. Absolute. Pardon?
Working?
Yeah, it pumps our water. Which this time of the year we don't need a lot of water. In the summer we pump more water for our gardens. And this 80-year-old technology works beautifully. This is our water storage tank. The windmill pumps the water up into the elevated tank, so our water system runs by gravity. So it's quite low pressure, like about 2.5 pounds of pressure, as opposed to most city systems are in the neighborhood of 60 pounds or more. So we've learned how to operate with very low water pressure, and it's rather simple. You just have bigger pipes and just are always aware that you need, when you're doing things, that you don't have a lot of pressure. But we've found that drip irrigation still works, and with a little tinkering you can make sprinklers work. And it's just paying attention to what your resources are and then making adaptations to make things work.
How did you source that water tank? I mean, did you make that yourself?
Well, no. I was fortunate to buy that from a friend. It's stainless steel and it's 1,100 gallons. And it originally had been made for a company that I think they made cedar oil, and there were some heating elements in it. I think what they did is put cedar chips in it and heated it up, and then the oil would separate from the cedar chips. So that's where it originated, and then by luck I happened into it. So.
How deep is your well, and can the windmill pump water from a very deep well, and how good is the water? Can you use it for drinking, or is it just for irrigation?
Our well is 110 feet deep, and in our area that's probably average to a little bit deeper than average. It's been quite some time since I've checked the water level, but we did have 90 feet of water in the well, so the well is really deeper than it really needs to be. We always just drank our well water, and it's pretty good well water. I don't exactly know number-wise how hard it is. Now we have a solar water distiller to purify the water, so that's what we use for drinking. It's just to kind of ratchet up the purity of the water, but it is good. So. Well, we've got some pictures, and why don't we just, I think it's coming up fairly soon here. Just putting the two together, the windmill pumps up into the water tank. When the water tank is full, it overflows, and I've got a bucket that I hang on the lever that turns off the windmill. So it's a crowd pleaser usually. This is our small wind generator. It's just a 7-foot diameter blade. It's, I consider it secondary to the photovoltaic panels in terms of our power production. We've gone without a wind generator from time to time because of breakdowns. It's been a long time, knock on wood. And we can get along fairly well just with the solar panels. But the two together in Oklahoma work really well because we usually have sun or wind. Although when you're totally dependent on sun or wind, you will find out there are times when there is not any sun or wind.
How many watts is the generator?
The generator's rated at 900 watts. But that's at a pretty high wind speed, like about 28 miles an hour. And that's one thing about wind, it's not steady. Like a sunny day, the solar panels are cranking it out, you know, all the time. The wind is never steady. And it also changes directions, so the wind generator loses some power just because it has to turn about and face different directions.
Do you have only one wind turbine in your property or more than one?
Just this one little one for electricity and then the other one that pumps water. So they have two distinct purposes and they're distinctly different pieces of machinery too.
Is this made by you or you just buy the component and somebody or yourself put it together?
The latter, yeah. These are, everything that you've seen so far are things that we've purchased, either new or used, and installed them ourselves. Way early on, I built some homemade wind generators, and it was a great education, but for something that needs to stay out in the weather 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and perform in light winds and medium winds and high winds, that's a pretty big order for a home handyman, or it was a bigger order than I could fill. So for the most part, it's better to purchase good equipment than to try and make it yourself. There's exceptions, and it's always worth it. If you want to make something yourself, it's always worth it for the education. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to get something that's better and cheaper, because most often that's not the case.
Did you run into any kind of regulations about you could or couldn't, or you just out in the country so far that you didn't run into anything?
That's a tough question. Basically the latter, and I think also since we did this so long ago that really no one was paying attention. So it's a tough question.
So you just have to check with your city
Yeah.
and see what they allow or if they would.
Yeah.
So they're not making you sell back any energy you generate?
We are not connected to the electrical grid, so that's not an issue for us. Being off-grid is of no virtue in terms of the environment or in terms of economics. Being off-grid is not as efficient as if you had these same devices and were on the grid feeding back into the power system. Batteries are inherently inefficient. At best, they're 80% efficient, so right there you're wasting 20% of the energy. It makes good sense to be off-grid if you're 2 miles from the power line and that's where your home is. But for us, it doesn't make sense. So the question is, well, why are we? Well, that's just kind of how things started out. And back in the 1970s, being grid connected with an alternative energy system was, no one had ever even thought of that. And I was just eager to use wind power, so the rest is what happened. Did that kind of answer your question?
So do you have batteries?
We do,
Okay.
yeah. These are photovoltaic panels. There's a young man there that looks a lot like me in some ways. Photovoltaic panels have a good lifespan. If you buy a new photovoltaic panel nowadays, they have a 25-year guarantee. This picture was taken, I think, in 1989. So that's 22 years ago. And there's been some minor changes in this, but basically it's still the same thing in operation.
Is
So.
it stationary or does it track with the sun?
This one we can track manually. You can buy automatic trackers, and they're fairly expensive, but so you kind of have to do the numbers if you're installing a system as to whether it makes better sense to install more panels stationary or spend the money on a tracker. Part of it depends on your needs. A tracker will gain a lot more in the summer than in the winter because the sun makes a much bigger arc across the sky. So
Is that for electricity or hot water or?
the photovoltaics are strictly for electricity. Yeah, it's like in the energy game, everybody has a department. You know, the water pumping windmill just pumps water because it has the mechanical needs are different than the wind generator. In the solar department, there are the photovoltaics that produce electricity, and then there's solar water heating, different devices that do, and we've got pictures of that too, and then there's solar space heating. So they're separate jobs, so they take separate types of equipment. One nice thing about photovoltaic panels is that you can buy different brands and different ages of panels, and there's some guidelines to go by, but basically they all work together.
What voltage do you use?
Our system is a low voltage system. It's just a 12-volt system. I often use the analogy of an RV with a battery, system for when you're backwoods, and so we're like a big RV that's parked in the woods, I guess. But our basic voltage of the system is just 12 volts. Most newer systems are higher voltage, like 24 or 48 volts. And then grid-connected systems, they have photovoltaic panels that are wired together where they might get up to 400 volts, and then a device that converts that to AC that puts it in phase with the power line. Oh, just another example of they're here and there and everywhere, kind of at our place.
Are you using the battery to store the energy produced by your panel?
Yeah, we have a battery bank. I've got a picture. There it is. This is a picture that was taken a while back, so this has changed some, but we have a bank of storage batteries that stores the electricity that's produced by the wind generator and the photovoltaic panels.
Are they the same battery in the vehicle, or they are different?
What we have it's the same type of technology, lead-acid battery technology that's been around for over 100 years. It's still the cheapest, most efficient way to store home energy. There's other technologies on the horizon that are, being used in electric cars and stuff, but in terms of home energy, it's still pretty much basically lead-acid batteries, and that's, there's environmental problems with lead and recycling lead. So, I talked earlier about how being off-grid is not necessarily anything to strive for. That's one of the downsides of being off-grid. This is a picture of a simple photovoltaic system showing all the components. So this is just a miniature version of what we've been looking at. And a little system like this could be put together that you could learn a lot from. A system like this could be put together for probably $200, and you would have a backup power system if your lights went out. On the left is a small photovoltaic panel, and then next to it is a little black box. You need a voltage regulator to control a little system like this so it doesn't overcharge the battery. It's just like in your car, the alternator has a voltage regulator built into it so it doesn't overcharge your car battery. Same exact thing. And then next to it in the black case is a small battery. And then the next little black box is an inverter that converts the battery power to 120 volt alternating current power. And they're readily available. You can go to Walgreens and buy a small inverter, or Target, or anywhere.
Have you found a good source for the photovoltaic?
A good source for the photovoltaic panels?
I don't know if there's one here in Oklahoma City, but Harbor Freight has some pretty good deals with solar panels.
Yeah,
I think
Harbor
they have a
Freight.
system for like $150 or something.
Yeah, I'm a little leery of the longevity of some,
I've got
it's,
one and I've had it for 2 years and I haven't had any problems. It's been great.
okay. So yeah, Harbor Freight. In Home Power magazine, there's a lot of ads of places that sell.
Reading about build your own photovoltaic panels, buy the panels and link them together.
Yeah, the question was about buying cells and then making your own panel. Again, a great learning experience, but when you think about that this panel is going to be out in the weather for 25 or 30 years or more, and it's going to have hail and ice and snow and rain and wind, and homemade things are great for learning, but probably, if that's your goal, that's great.
Well, I was reading it on the internet, the guys doing it.
Yeah. It's kind of like I read in, it was about an article about growing your own wheat. Growing your own wheat to save money is kind of like raising kids so you can get help with the dishes. And that's kind of how I would see building your own photovoltaic module. It would be a great experience, but in terms of a reliable piece of equipment to last for a long time, I wouldn't recommend it.
Another thing you got to worry about that is that whenever you buy those cells separately, you have to be really careful because they're filled with duds. That's about the only way you can get them too. Half of them, when it won't be working, they won't be in working condition because they could be cracked or for various reasons.
Yeah, they might be
That's why you can get them for such a cheap price, but once you factor that in, it's really not that much cheaper.
Yeah, so that's good to share that information because you can save time if you don't make mistakes. We also use solar energy for room heating, and this is a 4-foot by 16-foot panel that's on the roof of our bedroom. Very simple device. These things were quite popular in the 1970s. And then it just kind of fell by the wayside. And I think another thing that happened is that solar water heating and solar panels like this for space heating were put on asphalt roofs. It came time after 20 years to replace the roof. A new owner to the house, and they didn't have the interest in it, so a lot of these things got removed and not replaced, which leads us to, that's why we got this at a junkyard for $100, you know.
What's the function?
This is for space heating. So what this is a thin insulated box with glazing on the south side. I mean, that's all in the picture. And then behind the glazing, there's just some expanded metal mesh that's painted black. So it's just like when your car is sitting in the sun all day and the sun is coming in the windows, and even if it's a cold winter day, the car gets warm. This is just kind of that in a little bit more intentional way. The sun hits the black mesh, and because of the glazing, it heats the air inside the box. And then, not shown in the picture, well, you can kind of see on the left side there's a vertical insulated duct going down. There's also one on the right side. So there's a small 25-watt fan that circulates air through this box and into the room. It's pretty simple.
Question. In your house, do you have any appliance or maybe dryer or something use 240 volt electricity, or you don't have any 240 volt used in your house?
We don't have any 240 volt devices in our house. If we had a larger system, it's entirely possible, and you know, the equipment is available to do that, but we don't have a system that big ourselves, but it's entirely possible.
Okay, back to those cell phone and also solar energy panel. That big hail we had this year, what was that, this year early? Any damage by the hail to your panel?
We sweated that one out and got lucky, and the really worst part of it went south of us. But yes, we're vulnerable to.
So you did not hit that big hail we had in part of the city?
We didn't. We were well aware when it was underway that we were really in danger, and we got lucky. Yeah.
I've always wondered if it's possible to do like a covering of like chicken wire or that sort of thing to protect the panels against the hail.
Unfortunately, that wouldn't work because of the shading, well, chicken wire, you know, it wouldn't make that much shade, but it would make enough shade to really cut down the power of the panel. The reason being is that the photovoltaic panels are wired in series, so if just a little bit of shade really cuts off their power. For a heating device, it wouldn't be such a big issue, but so.
Is this fair if I say if that big hail was coming to your property, that fair is to say it might damage your panel, that hail?
Yeah. Most of the photovoltaic panels are guaranteed, or they say are good for about 1-inch hail, which is a pretty good hailstone, but we can get them a lot bigger than that here. So it's one of the, life is full of danger. This picture bothers me a little bit because it looks crooked. The house is not crooked, but just another view of how that solar heating panel fits into the picture. It used to be that everything was behind the trees, and this is not a very architecturally beautiful thing, but used to be you couldn't see it. Now you can. The main reason for this picture, I think, was to show this is the east side of our house. In the summer, we have a roll-down awning to keep the sun out. This is our solar hot water heating system. Again, this is technology that really goes back to the early 1900s. This is not new technology. And then there was quite a resurgence in interest in solar water heating in the 1970s. And today it seems like there's more excitement and interest in the photovoltaics than there is in solar hot water heating, which is a bit unfortunate because solar water heating really is very worthwhile, pays for itself, and water heating is one of the big energy consumers in most homes, whether it be electric or gas, and solar water heating can fill the bill.
Do you have a photovoltaic on there also?
Good eyes. There's a little photo. Pardon?
What was the question?
He was noticing that there's a small photovoltaic panel beside the the heater, and that powers a little pump that circulates the fluid through the panel. And I probably don't want to spend a lot of time now. We've got a schematic diagram of our water heating system here, and maybe if there's time later or afterwards you can come and look at it too. So, but good eyes. I forgot to mention earlier is, solar heat, solar hot water, solar electricity, solar light. The solar tubes really work good for bringing sunlight into the house. We have good windows on the south side of our house, but in the summer the sun is really high. Plus we put awnings on the windows to keep the heat, to keep the sun out, to keep the heat out. So in the winter we really don't need the solar tube light, but in the summer it's really nice.
I wanted to ask you, we were considering doing a metal roof also, and how much hotter is it, in the summertime, and what kind of R value do you have to place, to cut down that extra heat that's generated?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, in numbers of, we just put in as much insulation as we could in the attic. And ventilation of the attic is really important in the summer. Shading is really good, but we have a friend, Ron Farrell, who just built a canopy over his whole house. So it's like all summer in the shade, and it's great. Yeah.
We just experienced that metal roof on a double wide, and we put 1-inch boards every 3-foot spacing where it would have an air flow underneath it, left the composition shingles on it. Made a world of difference in the house.
That sounds great.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
You have the air to cool off the roof underneath it. It's just amazing.
I've thought of doing that on this roof, just put a second panel over it to just shade it. Yeah.
Go to Lowe's, they've got a new product, it's called elastomeric surfacing. It's like white paint, except it's warranted for 10 years. I put it on 2 years ago on a worn out shingle roof, which they say never paint them white, doesn't work. This stuff is made for it. Costs $80 for 5 gallons. It'll cover a couple hundred square feet. In the heat, regular shingles will burn you. put your hand on this stuff, you can't even hardly feel the warmth. It is incredible, and I'll never reshingle the house again. Every 10
That's-
years, put a new coat on.
Yeah,
And we're talking,
Can you walk on it?
yeah, you walk on it.
that's great information.
Blackjack at Lowe's Home Improvement Center. It's elastomeric, comes in white only. And it works like you would not believe. I've been looking for this stuff for 20 years,
That's great.
and it works. Hailstorm did not touch it. One chunk, about the size of a quarter, gone. Just slap more paint.
It must have enough elasticity to,
Did you have to roll that on?
I used a 4-inch paintbrush because I was working it under. They say roll it one way and then come back and roll it the other way. They're trying to sell the stuff. I put it on one coat
Uh-huh.
with a 4-inch paintbrush, squeegeed it in like I was just slobbing the hogs, and it worked like a charm. It works. I've never seen anything like it.
It's space-age material.
Think we had a question earlier about our well water, and you know, I said it is good water, but we go a step farther, and this is a solar water distiller. So we put our well water in this, and it's a trough that holds just about an inch of water, and then there's a glass. It's an old patio glass door that's the lid, and the sun warms the water and it vaporizes, and then it condenses on the bottom of the glass, and because it's at a slant, it trickles down the glass into a trough that's on the front part of the unit, and then down the trough into the little tube there and into the gallon jug. So you've got really pure drinking water. And yeah, you can kind of see in there, this picture was taken a couple years ago, and it's the sediment that's in there. We've had this in use for about 7 or 8 years, and it's building up in there. Sooner or later I'll have to clean it. So
Question. Are you adding anything to your well water in order, like many well water in Oklahoma, they are high in, for instance, calcium. What about your property? Are you adding anything? Are you taking your water to, let's say, OSU to exam, see what's in your water?
that'd be a real good idea, and we haven't done it. So we don't add anything. Our neighbors, you know, it seems like in our neighborhood, people don't have water softeners. Seems like we've got pretty good water, but we could do a little more self-education on that issue. Yeah.
Wouldn't that distilling process that you have right there take care of the calcium in the water? Wouldn't
Yeah.
it eliminate all the heavy metals?
Yes, it should. But if we had that, it could eventually wreak havoc on our plumbing and water heater and stuff. But in terms of drinking water, the solar distilled is, I mean, it's pure water. We had a chemistry student that said, yeah, when we clean equipment, we use distilled water because it's empty. It doesn't have any minerals. And people sometimes ask, well, don't you miss the minerals that your body needs? And from what we can discern is you get your minerals from fruits and vegetables. The minerals that are in water are really not in a form that your body absorbs. So, just a close-up of the...
That's your fill tube on the end.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had one person looking at the sediment that was in the distiller, and someone asked, well, what is that? And someone else said, well, those are kidney stones. And indeed, when our cat had a kidney stone and the vet did the surgery and presented us with a little jar with the cat's kidney stone, it looked just like what was in the distiller, and so the cats all get distilled water now. This is a solar food dehydrator, and this is a homemade thing, so we don't, you know, it's I'll go back. The front part there is a simple solar air heater collector, same principle. There's glazing, there's some black. It's actually just aluminum window screen that's the absorber of the solar heat. And then the bottom of the unit, kind of right in front of the wheels there, is open. There's just a screen there. So it draws in air. It's heated and rises because hot air rises. And then it goes up into the dehydrating chamber, and there's, what, I think 10 trays that have nylon screen, and we lay fruits and vegetables on those for dehydrating. So early on we saw the windmill and all that stuff. Those are the kind of the glitz, the fun stuff. This is the really important stuff. These are things that everyone can do. This is a solar oven. I don't need to say too much. It's pretty self-explanatory. Reflectors concentrate the sunlight. There's a glass over the oven, and that's all there is to it.
Do you have any control over temperature range?
The way you control temperature is by how it's aimed. On the back of it, I don't think I have a picture. There's a little target, and there's a little hole in one of the reflectors, and a beam of sunlight comes through that hole. And you can tell on the little target in back if you're aimed directly at the sun or if you're off aimed a little bit. So that's how you can control temperatures. For things like baking bread, you want to just max out, you know, and keep it. I'd probably move it every half hour to keep it aimed directly at the sun. For a lot of things, it's not that important. For some things, like we often make granola, that's what's in there now. It's real easy to burn it if you, I mean, it'll get too hot. So with nothing, this can max out around 400 degrees. When you put something in it to bake, it'll drop down to 300, maybe get up to 350 if it's a really clear, sunny day.
Clear sunny day in the winter?
Yeah, what makes it work is sunshine, and the outside temperature is of less importance, so it works good in the winter. We tend to use it a lot more in the summer because we don't do any cooking inside the house in the summer, because with our small power system, air conditioning is out of the question. So keeping heat out of the house is really important. And for people that have air conditioning, a solar oven could save a tremendous amount of energy, not just the energy that you would otherwise use for the oven, but if you were going to run your oven on a hot day and it's indoors and your air conditioner is trying to overpower the oven, that's a lot of energy. So if you go outside and bake in your solar oven, your air conditioner has a lot easier job. And
where did you get the materials for the reflector?
we bought this unit. There's a lot of, and before we had this one, we had quite a few different homemade versions of solar ovens. They all work. This one works a little better, gets a little hotter, it's a little more convenient because it folds up. A lot of simple ideas use just heavy-duty aluminum foil. And I think one reason this one works a little better is it has a really highly reflective. They're aluminum, very thin aluminum sheets. So I'm afraid I can't tell you where you can get that material. In this, in the solar or the Cooking with the Sun book, they do have the plan for one pretty much like this, and in fact, we bought that from the people that wrote this book. So.
As far as the metal, is it just polished stainless steel, or?
The reflectors,
Right.
they're aluminum,
Aluminum.
polished aluminum, yeah.
There is a website you can go to called solarevidence.com, and it will give you a lot of options.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good activity products happening with solar cooking, and it's really extremely beneficial in countries where they don't have the benefits we do, and they're burning firewood to cook, and, well, you know the story. Solar ovens are wonderful.
Question. That, how much it costs if you want to buy it, not make it?
This one cost us, Barbara, was it about $300? You know, it wasn't cheap. I think this one isn't available anymore. There's the Burns Sun Oven that you see in quite a few. They're a little over $200, I think. So, you know, not as cheap as you'd like it to be. But again, solar oven, you know, I talked about not homemade. Well, solar ovens, you can do pretty well homemade. You know, it's not high-tech stuff, and it's not going to sit out in the weather. You're going to take care of it and put it away. So it, you know, there's a lot more leeway. Another, I mean, you know, 1,000 people with clotheslines are going to make a lot more difference than 100 people with a windmill. You know, this is the important stuff here.
Can you make those yourself?
Yeah. You know, you could either scrounge something or maybe spend $5 for the line and
I saw an ad in the back of a magazine for a solar clothes dryer.
yeah.
Didn't show a picture of it, just showed clothes.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
What are you doing to wash those clothes?
Well, we have, I don't have a picture of it. We have a Staber washer, and there are many other good high-efficiency washers available now that weren't available, you know, just 5-10 years ago. Our Staber we really like. It's a horizontal axis machine, but it's top loading, and there's some engineering advantages to that. It uses, and there's others that do better. I think it uses, for the complete cycle, it uses, about 5 gallons for the wash and 3 gallons for each of the 2 rinse cycles. So that's what, it's about 11 gallons for the total run. And it's automatic. So
Runs off of your 12-volt system?
this runs off our inverter. So I don't think I mentioned that that initially our system was just low voltage DC, and now for quite a few years we also have an inverter that, you know, I showed in that picture of the little system, a little inverter. We have a bigger inverter that powers many of the appliances in our house. And so the Staber washing machine runs off the inverter.
Like 1,000 watts, or how big is it?
It's a 2,500 watt inverter. I don't think we've ever, you know,
Right.
probably 1,000 watts is the most we've ever asked of it.
Is that the actual, the 2,500, or it's cut in half?
Pardon?
Is that 2,500 the actual watts that it's putting out, or is it cut in half and then divided by another
I think it's the actual wattage that can put out, and it can surge to about 3 times that for starting things. Again, we've never had anything big enough to try that. You know, when you're running that kind of power out of the inverter, it means that much power plus a little more has to be going into it. So that's the thing you got to think about.
That runs off of your generator that's up on the pole?
Well, it all goes to the batteries and then to the inverter. Yeah, you need a balance in the system.
Yeah.
So this picture is a little dated. We do nearly all of our gardening and field activities with either hand tools or electric powered tools. The reason I say nearly all is after the ice storm we got a chipper because we had so many limbs to dispose of, and that's gasoline powered. And now and we also have a shredder because we also had a fire, and we've got a tremendous amount of dead stuff to process. So we burn gasoline in those 2 machines. Otherwise, in the foreground is an electric walking tractor that we still use. We've had that for 20 years to mow the blue stem prairie grass that we have. And
is that converted, or is that an original electric?
it's converted. So, and this is an old Boland's garden tractor that's also converted to run on electric. You just remove the gasoline engine and put in an electric motor and add some golf cart batteries, and you've got an electric tractor. So, in the mid to late 1970s, General Electric made electric garden tractors. It was a real serious piece of equipment with all the implements and attachments that anyone could ever want. So there's, if you look up, I would imagine, Electrac on your computer, you'll find a bunch of information. There's quite a few people, there's quite a few General Electric tractors still out there and still in use. And so it's, you know, again, this isn't a new idea.
Is it cutting grass?
We don't use this for cutting grass. We've got a little electric Newton cordless electric lawnmower. We don't really mow a big lawn, and the field we mow just once a year. So I use this mostly for pulling trailers and stuff, and then I have an inverter mounted on it, and I can run an electric chainsaw anywhere on the property using the electric tractor as the source. So, and then when the electric tractor is parked in the garage, it's plugged into the shop. So its batteries are not sitting idle, they're being put to use in the shop. And I've read, you know, in the future we'll have our electric cars sitting in the garage powering our houses. Well, we're just kind of jumped the gun on that one. And there's hand garden tools are the greatest. This is one of our favorites, the broad fork. It's, well, you can see it's a big double-handled fork that we use for loosening the soil. Yeah, we're fortunate to have sandy soil. It's easy to work. There's a downside to sandy soil as well, but it's not the hard clay that many people have in Oklahoma. And a hand scythe is, we use that for some of the mowing and trimming in the summer.
It's like work.
Well, it is work.
No kids, huh?
So, yeah. But, you know, some people go to the gym for exercise. So.
I prescribe it, Dr. Theory.
We don't have chickens right now. This was our mobile chicken coop. It's really nice to be able to move livestock. Well, we've not had much experience with livestock other than a small flock of chickens. And for many years, we kept them in a pen that circled the garden, and that had some advantages to keeping grasshoppers and bugs out of the garden. But after 20 years or so, it seemed like the chickens weren't as healthy, and I think it was just that the soil was getting, they just needed to move. There was cycles with, I don't know what, parasites and things like that. Ever since we put them on the move, we never had any problems again with worms or anything like that. Well, chickens are pretty vulnerable creatures, so
I see you got a top on it, though.
yeah. We did have some years when we could let them roam free, and it's really nice when you can do that, but between predators of dogs and coyotes and raccoons and possums. And this shows the chicken. This is called a chicken tractor. The idea being that it does the same work that a tractor does. So the chicken tractor has come down on the right side there and tilled that cover crop in, and it's been turned around and it's going north. So at that point, I think I was probably moving it once a day.
Oh, they're tearing the ground up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they do a lot of scratching.
Yeah. We raise most our own seedlings. Barbara's really, she's the guru of the seedlings. So she starts them in little flats with little soil cubes, and then here they're being transplanted into a cold frame where they'll grow for probably a month or 6 weeks. You think these are broccoli or something, Barbara?
Looks like it.
So, and then they'll be planted out into the garden.
Do you make your own soil cubes, or do you buy the ones that expand?
I make them.
She has a little thing that looks like a cookie cutter with, you can get it from Johnny's Johnny's Seeds to make the soil cubes. So this is some of this picture is probably early spring, but this is kind of some of the activities we've been doing right now is getting the cold frames, the cold frame going. And that's a picture, I think that was taken in the spring when I just removed a cold frame from plants that had been growing through the winter or early spring with the protection of a cold frame. These are cones. They're like miniature greenhouses, another way to extend the season both later in the fall and earlier in the spring.
Are they plastic coin or?
Yeah, they're fiberglass.
Where do you find that?
We made these, and the book is Solar Gardening. I think, and I can't remember the author's name, but it was probably, some of these are 15, 20 years old. Book in the library called Solar Gardening, and they'd kind of worked out the dimensions of diameter and the size of vent hole in the top. And on cold winter nights, we'd put a brick over the top vent.
How big were those things if you put a brick over them?
Well, they stand about 2 feet tall, and I think they're about 30 inches in diameter. And I think I see snow in the background there, so this is probably an early spring picture.
For seedlings, you could use the 2 or the 3-quart bottles.
Yeah,
Cut off. And put the cap back on it.
yeah,
Cold night.
yeah, using pop bottles. One of the challenges of winter gardening with greenhouses and cold frames is the wide variation we have in temperatures. You know, it'll get pretty cold at night, and then when the sun comes out, it's going to get really, if you don't vent it, you're going to cook your vegetables before you pick them. So that can be challenging. This is our greenhouse that we made 7 or 8 years ago, and we've really enjoyed having that.
Are they glass or that your sunroom, are they those panels made of glass or?
It's fiberglass.
Fiberglass.
Yeah, it's corrugated fiberglass. It's kind of the same idea as the hoop houses, but we used fiberglass glazing. Have mixed emotions about that. It's not, you know, recyclable. It's chemicals and resin and all that.
Oh, you use like a harder plastic, different type of plastic that'd be recyclable?
I really don't know if there is any that's recycled. It's an area that I'd want to research. We have cats that like to charge and jump on top of the greenhouse, so this stuff holds up.
PVC substructure?
The frames are chain link fence top rails, bent to make a hoop. And again, in the Johnny's seed catalog, they now have a device, I think it's $59, it's not that expensive, that you can use for bending chain link fence top rails for making the hoops for hoop houses. They're really, I mean, these things are really taken off and really extending the growing season for a lot of people. So it's
Did you bend those yourself, that design?
I did. The ones in Johnny's, I think you get with a normal 21 or is it 20-foot length chain link fence top rail, you get a 12-foot wide by 7-foot high. And this one is 14 feet wide. I wanted to kind of tweak the width a little bit. And fortunate for us that we're short, it's not 7 feet high, but it's plenty enough for us. So.
Because it's a different design than what you normally see out of the bent rails. You know, they usually do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Drop below the surface of the ground is all?
Pardon?
Drop below the surface of the ground?
The frames are anchored with U-bolts. I bolted them onto some of the recycled plastic decking, and it's really held up well. So it basically sits on top of the ground, and it's anchored at a few places so the wind doesn't blow it away. A few more pictures. Doesn't look this good every winter. This looks pretty nice.
When in the winter, when the temperature is extremely cold, do you use any heater or something in your?
Great question. We don't use any supplemental heat, and everything we grow in the greenhouse is cold hardy. This, you know, I tell people this is not a tomatoes in January greenhouse. These are lettuces, kale, cilantro, broccoli, cabbage, arugula. All these plants are cold hardy, and our experience is that as they go through the winter, they seem to get even hardier. And I'm not a plant physiologist. I don't understand it, but we were down to 17 below zero last February 9th.
Really?
And everything in the greenhouse is frozen solid. We do, when it gets really cold, put another cover over the plants so it's double covered, but still at those kind of temperatures, everything's frozen. It thaws out and basically things are okay. And it's just amazes me.
And it freezes.
Yeah.
Going back to the extreme temperature, have you ever had any trouble with your water storage freezing up?
We haven't had trouble with the storage. We've had a few periods when, even though the pipe comes out the bottom of the tank, and it's well insulated where it comes out of the bottom, but somewhere along the road or along the way, it's frozen up for as much as 3 or 4 days. So some winters we've never had any freeze-ups, and some winters we've had a few days when it is frozen. Basically, the tank is big enough that it has enough volume to, that it's not a problem. That's our workshop and garage facing south. It's got a little bit of an overhang. It works out pretty good that in the summer the sun doesn't come in those windows. In the winter it warms the shop and makes nice light. Our home sits in the woods. And these are a few pictures inside the house. Our home is pretty conventional wood frame construction. The newer room is better. It's got 2x6 walls, and the studs are 2x4s, and they're staggered, so there's, it's better insulated, but it's really not anything that's colossal.
Installation, your house is foam or?
It's fiberglass in the walls and cellulose fiber in the attic. It could be a lot better than it is. It is what it is.
How many square feet is it?
The home is a total of about 700 square feet.
How about the heating and the cooling of it?
It's solar, either passive through the windows. I guess I don't have a picture of, and you saw the other heater on the roof, and then the wood stove. Those are our heat sources. This is on the porch. I talked about not having air conditioning. We don't cook inside the house in the summer. So this is the porch right outside the door, so it's very convenient. And when we do cook in the summer, which isn't probably as often as in the winter, we use either this stove here that's propane fired or the solar oven that we saw earlier. And you can also see in this picture the ceiling fan. It's absolutely essential in the summer.
You modify the motor, I take it.
Yeah, it uses a DC motor that's very efficient. This is our wood stove. It's both a cook stove and heats the house. In this picture, you can see just to the left of the stove, there's a copper pipe. That's from the heat exchanger that's in the back of the firebox that also heats the water that our solar system is also tied into. So when there's a fire in the stove, it's also heating our hot water. So again, the two systems work pretty well, because when it's cloudy, we're more apt to have a fire in the stove, and that heats the water. And if it's sunny and the stove is out, the sun's heating our water. This is our refrigerator. It's called Sunfrost. It's very efficient. We've had it 22 years. When we bought this was the only super efficient refrigerator available. The good news is nowadays most big name mass produced refrigerators are much more efficient than they used to be. And then if you really shop wisely, you can get units that are even more efficient.
Is that 120 volt?
This is 12 volt. They come in 12, 24, and 120 volt.
Is that an absorption system?
Pardon?
Is that an absorption system?
No, it's conventional refrigeration with a compressor, and
Yeah, okay.
it's just more thoughtful in its design. It's more of a cube, so you enclose more space with less surface area. And the compressor's on top, so the hot parts are up high rather than trying to reheat the box. We have insulating shades that we use on our windows in the winter. There's magnetic strips that hold the shade to the window frame, and it's a fabric called warm window that's made especially for this purpose of window shades. There, it's all the way down. So, talked about, you know, the old and the new. And I think that's it for the slides. So.
Get through the hot summers in your house. Is it tolerable in there?
Well, we have some strategies that work sometimes, and the other part of the answer to that question is sometimes we suffer. But the strategies are that we open all the windows at about, usually 8 o'clock in the evening. And also we have a vent in the ceiling that we can open to let hot air out. So we gather as much cool air at night as we possibly can. And then in the morning about 8 o'clock or so, we close all the windows. And if the night has gotten down to an average low of like 70, everything works just pretty good. If it's like last summer and you get up and it's 85, it doesn't work so good. So you kind of adapt, and the ceiling fan is very helpful. And but part of it is it's not very comfortable. Yeah. How about this fellow was, I think.
Have you done any experience with magnets, like a wheel magnet that would pull the gravity by itself, hooked up to a generator, and then from there to a converter? Total electric house?
Quick answer is no, I haven't.
Do you know
So-
for anybody that would sell strong magnets?
I think there's some advertisers in Home Power magazine that they use magnets like that in constructing wind generators. So,
It was kind of a silly question, but I assume in your younger days you were more prone to be in air-conditioned environments until you kind of went off the grid. In these later years, have you noticed a difference in your need to intake water?
well, we definitely drink a lot.
Dryness of your skin, or
Yeah, for sure we drink a lot more in the summer. And you know that you should drink before you're thirsty. So I think in the summer we're even more conscious of water intake. Yeah. Yeah.
Bruce, because of your all the trees, how far can you remote solar panel from the device that's going to run it? Say a 120-watt panel.
How far can you? Yeah, there's a lot of variables. It depends on the voltage of the panel, and you look at a wire chart of how much voltage drop there'll be in the wire over X distance. So it's a matter of doing the homework. And the higher voltage will end up being cheaper because you can use lighter gauge wire. So that's, as you get longer wire runs, it's better to go to a higher voltage. Let's see.
If you did it again, would you leave the wind generator out and spend the money on PV cells instead? See, you seem to be a little more interested in the PV aspect of it.
If I personally did it again, I'd do it the same because I really enjoy it. You know, it's the fun factor. But in terms of what you rightly picked up is if you're not into tinkering, you're going to find a lot more benefit from the photovoltaic panels than the wind generator.
So maintenance seems to be the key issue with the wind generators.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate with this one. It's been really reliable. But it has moving parts, and anything with moving parts, sooner or later, you know, it's going to need some repair. It's great fun to watch on a windy day. You know, there's those other fringe benefits.
I'm sorry, I have a question, but I don't know if somebody asked that question and you answered, or maybe I did not get it. How you climb going and doing the preventive maintenance on your wind turbine?
Well, the wind turbine, the wind generator, that's on a tower that tilts down.
Tilts down?
Yeah, it's hinged at the base, and it's just held up with guy wires. So I've got a winch that's permanently installed, so you just can hook it up and drop it down.
And how many times you have to do it each year?
We put that tower up in, I think, '03, and we had it down. No, we've not had it. We've never had it down. No, we did one time because I added more guy wires on top, but it's not. Maybe once or twice a year I walk around and make sure the guy wires are, you know, nothing's come loose, and that's about it. And then the water pumping windmill, yes, I do climb up. That's shorter. It's about 30 feet, and there's a ladder on the side, and you climb up there and change the oil, and it does take a little bit more servicing, but after 80 years, you know.
That wind turbine, do you have to have any, let's say, warning light on top of the turbine for airplane or something? Any requirement or?
No, it's not anywhere as near. I forget what I know I've read it's 65 feet, and I think you have to be 200. So it does have a little light on it, but it's not necessary. It's well below any limits like that. So it's getting past time, so anybody should feel free to leave as they need to.